Hey guys, Verso here. Thanks for checking out another one of my videos. Today I will be doing the first of probably a couple faction reviews. Definitely going to be at least two, might be three. So we're going to start off with going over the Spiral Core additions to Tohaa for the Daedalus Falls update that dropped today. I had made a video that touched on this a little bit. Some of you might have watched it. I put it up yesterday. I'm recording this on the 27th of March. But it was a very negative video and got negative feedback. I knew it was a negative video going in, so I decided to take it down because there's really no point in putting that kind of thing up. So instead, I'm going to touch on one of the things I talked about in that video, which is going to be symbiomates, and then we'll go into the Spiral Core stuff. So not only did the new models and sectorials and reworks and all that kind of stuff come out today, there was also some rule changes. The biggest ones being probably a buff to total immunity, and then a pretty substantial nerf to symbiomates. I'm going to preface my conversation about symbiomates by saying that if you do not play Tohaa, you're not well equipped to understand how big the symbiomate change makes a difference for the army. I'm not saying that to be elitist or rude or anything like that, but unless you have a lot of experience with Tohaa, like you play against them a lot or something like that, it's difficult to grasp how much was lost. So just to go over the change really briefly, symbiomates now give a flat 9 arm and 9 BTS, as well as total immunity for the duration of the order that you use them on, and they are a mandatory use piece of equipment. So if you take any kind of hit that results in an arm or a BTS save, you must use the symbiomate. It's not, you don't have a decision anymore. So on face value, that is certainly a bit of a nerf. You're going to need to be in cover to really get mileage out of the symbiomates, because arm 12 BTS doesn't usually matter, is quite a bit better than arm 9. And arm 9 by itself is fine. You know, you're disregarding a lot of the guns on the games with like a 25% chance, something around that. But considering how they used to work, that's not acceptable for how symbiomates are now. That's not an acceptable use, is just to run them a guy out in the open or something like that. That's the tactic everybody loves to bring up, is you know, the Tohaa player running a model to a console, not caring about the shots, just taking a whole bunch of AROs, not getting crit, burning the symbiomate, and then, you know, winning the mission or something like that. That's not really a very common tactic for Tohaa players for a bunch of reasons that I won't get into. But what we did lose access to is things like being able to deal with templates or deployable weapons very reliably with symbiomates. So something that you could do before was to intentionally proc either, you know, crazy koalas or mines or something like that, and also take a face-to-face roll, so that if you win the face-to-face roll, you eat the mine, the symbiomate goes away, whatever. But if you lose the face-to-face roll, then you're eating the deployable weapon or the template or whatever it is, and probably their shot back. So it was very excellent bad luck protection. So you can't do that anymore. Makes us much weaker to things like flash pulses, because you have to use the symbiomate on flash pulses. Big drawback for Tohaa, because we usually have pretty good BTS on most models. A lot of models running around with a BTS of 3, so a lot of the time you would just eat a flash pulse, or you would just move past a flash pulse because you didn't care if it blinded you or not. You just wanted to get somewhere. Now you can't do that while keeping your symbiomate intact, because you must blow it if they hit you. Just a lot of things like that. The Kael'tar now being arguably overcosted. I think it's probably 1 to 2 points overpriced on the usual profile. And then we didn't really get anything interesting to play with within our own faction to compensate for that. So I was hoping for maybe like a Symbio Bomb buff, because they're really bad, to be frank. Something like that would have been very welcome to maybe bring up some of the parts of the faction that historically don't really get played with or anything like that. But they just saw fit to nerf the symbiomates and not really give us anything as compensation. So that's my thoughts on that. I also think it makes certain models a lot worse. The Gorgos would be one of them. The Rasail would be another. Coatail would be another, although the Coatail was already pretty bad. Hurts the Sukiel a little bit, because losing mimetism on her is a pretty big deal, even though she keeps a good ballistic skill and stuff like that. The Drawl, which is a new model, gets much worse when it goes Symbiote inactive. So I now kind of think of Symbiont armor as almost a strictly worse NWI. not all models that have NWI have shock immune, but Corvus Belli has been handing that out pretty regularly lately. So a lot of the new shiny ones do. So Symbiont armor is basically like having NWI and then either bio immunity or shock immunity, but worse because you will take stat downgrades and stuff like that. So that's a huge hit to the faction of Tohaa. People like to meme about Tohaa relying on symbiomates and things like that, but I don't think unless you play the faction you really realize how tied in they are to how the army is built and designed. And I don't know the inner workings of Corvus Belli. I don't pretend to know any of that stuff, but I don't think whoever made this change knew that either, and I think it was a bad change. So that's all I'll say about it. If you guys want to discuss the symbiomate update more, I'm happy to do that in the comments below, but I won't waste any more time on it. So now we're going to go into the new offerings that Tohaa have from Spiral Core. This is just the stuff for Tohaa. I will do a video going over Spiral Core itself at some other point this week. So we're just going to go over what the additions are, not the entire new faction. And I think that's probably a good way to do it because it bite-sized pieces a little bit more. So with that, let's jump into it. So first new model is going to be the Chaxa Long Arms. I had very low hopes for these, and it basically panned out. So you have a light infantry with pretty average to bad stats all over the place, average movement, bad ballistic skill, good physique, bad willpower, although they probably won't use it very much. Good arm 3 is nice, and then everything else is pretty regular. You also get a fire team duo, which is not useful, so I don't know why they gave them that. I mean, you would never probably take 2 of these things to make use of that, but whatever. They have multi-terrain, which is good, and then religious troop, which is okay. Would have been better just to have courage, because I think courage is just... I mean, it's not... I think courage is just better than religious troop. So that would have been appreciated, but we got religious troop. I don't know why they're religious. I'm sure that'll be explained in the fluff, but whatever. So first profile is the only one I can ever see seeing any table time, which is 2 Pulsars. If you're not familiar with Pulsars, they're just a chain rifle against BTS, a contender, which is a horrible gun, and then EM grenades, which are really good and do make a little bit of use of their decent physique. And then all of the profiles have a pistol and a close combat weapon. The problem is that that comes in at 19 points, which is very hefty. Like I said, contender, not a good gun. Pulsar and EM grenades both going to require you to get close, which you cannot do unless you are smoking up for these guys and stuff like that. But that's really just a waste of orders. There's many other models you could get in Tohaa that have EM grenades. Well, not many. There are other models in Tohaa you can get that have EM grenades or Pulsars, or a comparable weapon. So, and they can either go in a triad or they're better on their own or something like that. So these guys really needed to be something that could go into a triad, and they also needed to be quite a bit cheaper. So we'll go down. The next one is a 31.1 SWIC portable autocannon. Portable autocannon is a very good gun. It hits very hard, but when we're putting it on a BS11 platform that has no way to get any kind of buffs, it is pretty terrible because you're not going to win any face-to-face rolls. Missile launcher, again, good weapon, but you're putting on a terrible platform. That comes in at 27 points, 1.5 SWIC. And then the last one is 27.0 SWIC for D-charges and a Mark 12. Again, kind of a weird profile. I don't know why they tagged D charges onto that. Mark 12 is fine, but basically everything comes back to the fact that this model cannot go into a triad, cannot be buffed in any real way, and has a terrible ballistic skill. So they seem to, the design team seem to have envisioned these guys as like kind of an immobile fire platform in the active turn, because they can't go into suppressive fire except for the Mark 12, things like that. So they're pretty much just garbage. These are probably one of the worst models I've seen released in quite some time. I don't know why you would ever take one under any circumstances in Spiral Core or Tohaa, but hey, they exist, so we reviewed them. So that's the Chaxa Long Arms. Moving on. All right, so we have the Drawl Saboteur. This is one of the ones that I think actually has some potential. So we have 6-2 movement, Symbiont active, which is very good. 6-2 movement is one of the better movement profiles you can have, especially on an infantryman, because a lot of the times you're going to be moving and then shooting, so you use the fast part but not the slow part so much. And then even if you are double moving, you're just as fast as everybody else, not that big of a problem. Average CC, high ballistic skill for Tohaa. We're not very good in gunfights. 12 is pretty much our like average good gunfighter profile. So 13 is elite for us. So that's very good. Physique 12 is also good for Tohaa. Whip 13 average, 2 arms, 6 BTS, pretty average for most of our guys. A lot of them are 2 and 3 BTS, so he gets a little bit extra BTS, but that's probably not going to come in handy very often because there's not that much, not that many guns out there that go against BTS except for flash pulses. But he gets it just the same, so useful corner case stuff. And then he's normal size. So in the special skills, he can go in a triad, very important. For deployment level 2 is very good for reasons I'll get to in a minute, but just always welcome to have. You don't have to use it or anything like that. We have Stratocloud, which is a pretty interesting piece of equipment. It is both better and worse than I thought it would be. So if you're not familiar, it creates a, I believe it's zone of control area around the user, which is a low visibility zone. So -3 for face-to-face rolls through it. Nothing gets around that, so you can use it against MSV stuff. And then it also creates a saturation zone, so anything that's going through or into the zone or whatever gets one less shot than normal. This does follow the drawl around. He can be deployed with the Stratocloud out, or he can spend an order to pop it out. Either way, it's basically treated like Albedo, where it lasts for a round. So you'll get it on your active turn if you use an order for it, and then the opponent's following turn, or if you deploy for it, it'll be the first game turn. So that's a nice little thing there, although I do wish it lasted longer, or maybe it was like disposable 2 or something like, or even disposable 1, so you could baggage it. That would be nice. But it does not affect the user. So it will affect his fire team and everybody else in your army as well as the opponent's army, but it does not affect the user. So you can go on some pretty good runs with this guy using that, and then you can also use him in combination with other models to shoot through the Stratocloud zone on your active turn, which will take you down a shot, but you're in a triad, so you're probably plus-minus a shot there, and then it'll put you on a -3, but it also puts your opponent on a -3 as well. And again, MSV or anything like that doesn't get around that stuff. So really good skill for being able to take fire teams on head-on with, either like a Sukiol or a Gaurail, something like that, because you'll take away one of their shots. A lot of the times, fire teams in ARO do rely on that extra burst to make things a little bit scarier. So if you can get it down to 1 dice, and then also take away their +3 bonus for being in a big team, it makes it a lot more manageable when you start running the odds. So Stratocloud, very good piece of equipment. Just wished it was either longer lasting or something like that. Also has hyperdynamics, so dodges on a 15, very good for dealing with like mines or templates or anything like that, which are definitely a problem for Tohaa a lot of the time. Has multi-terrain, which is always welcome. Specialist operative is a big deal because that means you can fit this guy into a triad very easily as a second gunner. He's not a good primary gunner, but he is a good secondary gunner. So you kind of, at least the way I play triads is I always like to have a gunner, a specialist, and a McCall. Because the McCall delivers you, the gunner kills stuff, obviously, and the specialist does stuff on scenario. So this guy, even though he's more expensive than someone who is just a specialist, is also a very good backup gunner with his stats and stuff like that. So you can have a very killy and diverse triad by throwing him in. And then finally, he has stealth, which is kind of whatever. Doesn't come up that much, especially in triad play, but you could find some corner case uses for it. If he goes Symbiont inactive, he does lose the Stratocloud. He does lose the hyperdynamics, and I believe that's it if I'm looking at this correctly. Yeah, so losing the hyperdynamics sucks, and losing the Stratocloud sucks, especially if you hadn't gotten to use it before. But what mostly sucks is he loses a point of ballistic skill, which is a big deal. His physical takes a pretty sharp turn down, and then of course he loses most of his arm BTS as Tohaa do. So that's why I also like this guy as a backup gunner, because you want to be taking very sure thing fights with him, because once he goes Symbiont inactive, he becomes quite a bit less useful, as his movement also goes to 4/4, so he loses that advantage. Going over to the profiles, most popular one probably is going to be the 30.0 Swick. SMG, Pulsar, D-Charges, Dazer. So I think SMGs are horrible guns because I rate range band above everything. All that matters is range band to me, because all that matters in the game is really whether you hit or stuff like that. Unless you're shooting a tag or something like that, most guns will kill most things in Infinity. So it's all about hitting and hitting as much as you can. That being said, it does mesh well with his kind of close range nature. He's pretty fast. He has the forward deployment, all that good stuff. So if you have the Stratocloud up and you can get into a group of models with the SMG, you can certainly get some work done there. And Tohaa don't really have that many guys that are popularly taken that are good at killing high arm models, so having something with AP on it is not the end of the world. The Pulsar is also a very good gun. Remember that the low visibility zone does apply to dodges, so if he rounds the corner on like a fire team or a couple guys or something like that, you can Pulsar them and they'll be at a -3 to dodge on top of any other modifiers they may or may not have. Makes him a very good clear out kind of model. And then since the Pulsar goes against BTS, if you're clearing out like line troops or remotes, well, remotes have good BTS, but line troopers generally don't. So he's probably going to use the SMG if he's going after remotes, probably the Pulsar if he's going after a lot of other things. D-Charges, not super useful, good for classifieds, but that's really about it. This guy is not a close combat person. So it's pretty much just for classifieds and missions, some missions. And then the Dazer is a deployable weapon. I believe it's deployable 3. So he does get 3 of them. And it just creates a, I think it's very difficult terrain. Do they have it in the wiki yet? Let's see here. I don't remember if they do or not. I thought they had it. Dazer. Yeah, the wiki is really screwed up right now because they haven't updated it well enough. Yeah, so disposable 3 pretty much works like a mine. You can see it has like 1 structure, 0 size, all that kind of stuff. And then it creates a very difficult terrain and a saturation zone. So the saturation zone is whatever. You can certainly make use of it for some things like I was talking about before, for dealing with fire teams. So if you don't want the -3 for the fire team, you can just put down a Dazer and shoot through that. But the very difficult terrain is quite strong, especially in a lot of missions, because you can place it and prevent people from running away very easily, or they prevent them from rushing you, which is a problem that Tohaa definitely has, because we have a big problem with templates, just because a lot of the stuff is in triads, so you can usually get 2 or 3 guys under 1 template. So slowing some of that stuff down would be very welcome indeed. And then he also has a viral pistol, which is something they gave to a lot of Spiral Core models. All of his profiles have a viral pistol. Really good for dealing with like NWI and stuff like that. Like I mentioned earlier in the video, Corvus Belli has been hanging out NWI and Shock Immune like it's going out of style. So viral is the only thing in the game that deals with those guys other than just shooting them to death. So having a viral pistol on a guy that wants to get close is a pretty good option there. The next profile is going to be a Mine Layer. It's just a Swick and 1 point more. He basically just trades out the Dazer for anti-personal mines. I don't like this one as much. I think that you can get a lot more mileage out of the Dazer, although in some missions, the forward deployment 2 with the Mine Layer and putting him into a triad can be very useful, but that is going to be table dependent, because remember, if he's in a triad, which you I think generally want him to be, he's not like a fantastic solo model or anything like that. They do have to stay within 8 of him, so they're going to have to deploy, the rest of the triads going to have to deploy pretty much on the line. And that can be problematic sometimes. And then the last profile is something that Tohaa will probably never play, which is 40 points, 1 Swick Mine Layer, AP Marksman Rifle, D-Charges, Anti-Personnel Mines. So the mines are pretty much the same as we just talked about. D-Charges are not a very useful part of his kit. And then an AP Marksman Rifle is okay. That turns him into more of a gunner, which is important for Spiral, but not as important for Tohaa, because we actually have really good gunners already. And then we already have stuff like the Sukiel K1 Combi, if you're looking to go that route or something like that. So I just see that guy as being way too expensive. I don't know why they made that profile so expensive when it's really not that good. So overall impressions on the Drow for Tohaa is the 30.1 is really good. I like him in your more serious triad, so probably the one that's going to have a Gaurail or a Sukiel or an Ektros, something like that. He's a really good backup, and he can kind of play some interference for those guys, because a lot of the time you give those models more farther range guns, so they don't fight close up very well, and he takes care of that for you along with the McCall if you have one in the triad. So I really like all those guys together. So thumbs up on the draw. He's not faction defining or anything like that, but certainly has a place, and I expect to see him in good few lists there. All right, so next guy up is going to be the Grief Operator. This is not something that just Tohaa and Spiral Core get. I believe he also works for Vanilla Combined and Onyx. Correct me if I'm wrong. There might also be some other factions he works for. I don't know. But this guy is actually pretty good as well. So pretty standard infantry, 4/4 move, whatever ballistic skill, low, or whatever close combat, low ballistic skill. 11 is definitely a drawback for him. Average physique, average whip, line trooper stats for pretty much the rest of it on down. So nothing very sexy there. He does have Multispectral Visor 1, which is really good for taking fights with, like Ariadna, the Mimetism specialists that a lot of lists like to run, things like that. So he can fight those very competently. And then he has Courage, so we'll take that. It's never a bad thing to have Courage. And then the profiles are kind of weird. So the first one is going to be, he picks up Mimetism and Forward Deployment 2, and then has a Combi Rifle and D-Charges, as well as 2 Breaker Pistols. So this guy is like a pretty midline skirmisher. He comes in at 22.0 SWIC. The Combi Rifle is going to be for fighting things that are a little bit farther away, but he wants to use the 2 Breaker Pistols more of the time because it's going to be the same shots, but the Breaker ammunition makes it a substantially better gun. So he definitely wants to get in there. Fortunately, the Forward Deployment 2 helps him do that, and then the Mimetism is good for firefights. So this guy's kind of like a cheap little solo skirmisher that you're going to want to put somewhere very hidden, and then he's going to come out and play later. The second profile is much the same, upgrades to 25 points, and then just trades out the D-Charges and the Combi Rifle for a Shock Marksman Rifle. I don't like this profile as much. It's still very good. The Shock Marksman Rifle is a very good weapon. It's just that it's kind of expensive for a BS11 model. And then he already has the Breaker Pistols, so I'm not looking for like a fantastic other gun. I'm just trying to look for a way to get him close. So I don't rate that profile as highly. And then the last one is the most exciting one by far, which is Inferior Impersonation. If you're not familiar, that is one of the new rules as well, where you can only be in the Impersonation 2 state, so you can never deploy an Impersonation 1 or anything like that. But everything else works as normal, so you can deploy on your opponent's side of the table. You could pass a whip check to be in their deployment zone, that kind of thing. Very strong. And then, of course, along with Impersonation, you get Surprise Attack, Surprise Shot, those kind of fun things. So he has a Combi Rifle, which is, whatever. But he keeps the 2 Breaker Pistols, which become much better with this profile, which is 21 points, so the cheapest profile, and only costs 1 SWIC. SWIC is not something that Tohaa is ever concerned about. I struggle to use 3 SWIC in most of my lists. It's usually less than that. So we can certainly give him the SWIC there, and then this guy makes for a really good Lieutenant Hunter or like backline support hunter, things like that, because he can just impersonation around, get somebody killed with the Breaker Pistols using Surprise Shot, and then he's pretty much done his job. So this is like a not as powerful, like it's not as good as like a Fide or a Specula or anything like that, but it also comes in at a significantly less cost. So this guy makes a really good reserve model, or just a strong deterrent. When you can deploy, on your opponent's side of the table, it makes it very easy to place him somewhere where it's very difficult to get to him, but he's always going to be at worry and things like that. So I rate this guy very highly. I think he's also a solid addition to Tohaa. We had problems going lieutenant hunting, which matters for like some missions, firefight, decap, those kind of things. And then overall, he's just going to be good in any kind of direct action mission, and it has a place in some button pushing missions as well, especially if you're trying to protect a certain area or something like that. So if you're playing supplies, for example, this guy is fantastic because he's like, hey, you trying to pick up that box right there? Blast that guy. So really big help in that regards. Only AVA 1, but probably wouldn't take more than 1 most of the time anyways. So definitely a solid addition for us in the Grief Operator. All right, so next we have the other new, less inferior impersonation model, the Qton, sure. This one is more of a beefy guy. So we start off pretty average stats with movement and CC. Ballistic skill is average for a more elite Tohaa model. Not the greatest physique. Willpower is average. 2 arms, 6 BTS is whatever. Not really going to save him for anything in particular, but whatever. And then he has inferior impersonation, which we just talked about. Hyperdynamics, so he dodges on a 14, which isn't amazing, but it's really good against templates. So he's good at gain around templates, but not really much else. He has stealth, sure. Courage, sure. And then we lose hyperdynamics when we go symbiote inactive, and then we lose a point of physique, and then our defensive stats as per normal. This guy only has one profile in Tohaa, which is just the combi rifle viral pistol profile for 30 points. So that's why I don't rate him very high. There are other profiles in Spiral Core which are better for this guy in my opinion, but they are not usable by Tohaa, so they're not worth talking about. Most of the time, this guy's primary weapon is going to be the viral pistol, because again, he's probably going to be going around hunting lieutenants or other support models or something like that. And Corvus Belli likes to make models that have combi rifles cost quite a bit. He also costs half a SWIC. It's kind of weird, but it doesn't really concern Tohaa at all. I don't like this guy as much as the Grief Operator. He is better, but I would rather save the 9 points and have a little more useful loadout. I would trade the viral pistol for 2 breaker pistols. The reason for that is I would really like the additional burst compared to the increased lethality of the viral pistol. I'm all about making sure that you win face-to-face rolls and things like that. So more burst, good range bands, stuff like that is all right up my alley. I also don't really rate his symbiont armor very high. You can't give him a symbiote mate even if you wanted to, because he deploys in a marker state, unless you're not deploying in a marker state, in which case why are you taking this guy? So he's probably just going to get killed really quickly after he does what he's going to do, but he's not any better at it really than the Grief Operator is. So I'd rather just take the cheaper guy and use the 9 points to put into like a regular order or something like that. So not a bad model by any stretch, but I think he's just overshadowed by the Grief Operator in the role that they both try to do for Tohaa. So what do we got next here? All right, the Kriegel Agent. People that watched my Spiral Core preview video remember I was super excited for this guy, and then my hopes were expertly dashed when Corvus Belli made the decision to not make the light smoke grenade launcher profile work for Tohaa. Anyways, this guy, pretty average across the board again. Average move, bad CC, average ballistic skill for a Tohaa shooter, bad physique, average whip, bad defensive stats, but pretty average for us. He can go in a triad, so thumbs up for that. And then he has Fair War, Eraser, and Mirror Ball. So this is where a lot of this guy's power comes from. If you're not familiar with those, Mirror Ball is a white noise zone that you place within zone of control. So a lot like, just the white noise program for hackers. Obviously, you don't have repeaters or things like that to do it with. So you can't use it as effectively as an ARO piece, but really good for taking on like standalone MSV models with something like a Sukiel or an Ektros or whatever you're going to use, because they can fire through the white noise no problem. The other model is going to be forced to dodge because they're probably not going to shoot back at a -6. So it makes it very easy to take fights against those kind of models. Not as good at taking out fire teams, because if it's a fire team core, they're going to have 6th Sense level 2, so the MSV model doesn't care that you're firing through a zone that it can't see through. But if you can get rid of 2 of the guys, then it helps a little bit, but by then the fire team is largely taken care of already. Eraser is basically a jammer, so it's a zone of control, no line of fire required, whip check, and in the active turn you can put out 2 whip checks, so you can either do 2 models or put 2 checks on 1 model, and those models get a -3 to their willpower. If they fail it, they have to take, I think it's damage 13, it's either half BTS or 2 BTS rolls, I can't remember off the top of my head. And then if they fail, they go isolated. So that's where this guy is really good. He pairs very well with a McCall and a Triad because the McCall can deliver him within 8. He does not need line of fire to use Eraser, and it takes care of a bunch of problems for us. It only works against models that have wounds, so you can't Eraser like a tag or remotes or anything like that, but that's fine. It does give Tohaa a really good answer for strong Rambo models. So something like Achilles, you can easily jam him up because his physique isn't anything really special, or I'm not sorry, his willpower isn't anything very special. Things like that. And then it's also a very good ARO piece if you are worried about rush type models, so like Brandon Castro, Fade, anything kind of like that. You can at least shut them down as they're coming in, or stop their rampage at like one model or something like that. So very useful ability there. The 2 profiles that we get is SMG and Pharaoh Booster Viral Pistol Knife, 0 SWIC, 24 points. As I've said, SMG not that good, but the Pharaoh Booster is actually okay. It's burst 2. It has a couple different well, it's not always burst 2. So you can either burst to it, it's damage 14 pheromonic. So that just means you test against BTS instead. And then if you fail, not only do you take wounds or structure, but you also enter the targeted state. That part is not super useful, but it does count for classifieds and things like that, according to the wiki. So that part's good, depending on if you have like a certain classifieds or not. Then you also have a damage 16 single shot version, or you have a the stun mode version, which you're probably never going to really use unless you're playing Hunting Party or something. So actually not that bad of a gun. Unfortunately, it only works well at 16 to 24 inches, but can complement a lot of different Triad models very well with that. Burst 3, damage 14 gun is pretty good, especially against BTS. And then a Burst 2, I'm talking about if he's in a Triad, damage 16 against BTS is very strong. That actually gives a decent game against tags and very resilient things. Damage 16 is very high. So that gun actually is pretty decent. The other profile is going to be a Breaker Combi Rifle, Light Grenade Launcher, Viral Pistol Knife, half a SWIC, 31 points. I do like the loadout on that one, but it's just too expensive. This guy is not a primary gunner for Tohaa because of his not super great ballistic skill and doesn't really bring anything else to win face-to-face rolls. So he's definitely also going to be either in like kind of a tertiary triad where you don't need him to fight regularly, or he's going to be in a triad where you don't care about having a specialist or a McCall, one of those generally. Really good for direct action missions because he's not a specialist, but he opens up a lot of possibilities for fighting and stuff like that. And then you can just do so much with Eraser and Mirror Ball that's really where his strength comes from. I don't think you'll see much of the 31-point profile in Tohaa. The 24-point profile is definitely where it's at because the Pharaoh Booster is a pretty decent gun. It pairs well with the SMG because then you're fighting at 0 to 8 plus 3 or 16 to 24 plus 3, so you only have to worry about one kind of dead range band. And then you also have Eraser at 0 to 8, which is, gives you some options there. So the Breaker Combi Light Grenade Launcher is a very good loadout, but I just wished he had either an additional ballistic skill point or mimetism or something like that would make him a little bit better in a firefight to really use those things. So I don't foresee that one being really good. It is also pretty expensive. Again, the model has a viral pistol, really good for the reasons I talked about. The Spiral Core model is one of their main uses is getting some more viral into Tohaa, which is pretty much the best it's ever been. Viral is the best ammunition type going right now, really. So that's always welcome as well. So Kriegel, again, thumbs up there. Probably going to see him pretty often in Tohaa as a one of. It's only AVA 1 anyways, but certainly has a place within the faction. All right, so next is going to be the Reeks Escorts. Again, pretty average stats. We have average movement, bad CC, bad ballistic skill, bad physique, average whip, bad defensive stats. We have structure instead of silhouette. That was something I was wondering about because when they did the preview, it showed that they had wounds. If you're not familiar with Tohaa, there's already a model called a Quarry Sentinel, which is basically the exact same thing as these guys. They just have some different flavor, and that has structure, but they didn't make it in structure in the end, so that's just something to bear in mind is that you cannot bring them back up with like a medic or something like that, although you're probably not going to try for that anyways. They can go into Triad, which is nice. And they have courage, which is fine. You can take a special fire team of 2 Reeks and a Kriegel. I probably wouldn't opt for that in Tohaa. There's just better triads you can make out of all of these models and stuff like that. So I'm actually not even sure why they put that in there. I don't know if that's like a glitch or not, because it already has fire team triads. There's really no reason to have a special fire team. So I'm guessing they're either going to take fire team triad off of it or get rid of that. If they take fire team triad off of the model, it's complete garbage in Tohaa. You can pretend these don't exist. And if they take away the special fire team, then that's fine. It doesn't cost them anything. Going on to the profiles, the only one you're ever really going to see in Tohaa is the 13.0 Swick boarding shotgun contender nanopulsar pistol electric pulse. The pistol and the electric pulse are both pretty useless. The contender is a horrible gun, but nanopulsar is very good, and a boarding shotgun is also very good. Helps out quite a bit with his bad ballistic skill. And Tohaa doesn't have a lot of boarding shotguns that get taken very often, so having this guy in as like a spare gunner for cheap or something like that is pretty decent. With the triad, he gets up to 3 shots, so he'll be 3 shots ballistic skill 17 before other modifiers, so that's very playable, although not something I would reach for when we can fill up triads with many other things. That's where I think these guys really struggle, is Tohaa is not lacking for triad fillers. Like, I would never take this guy over a McCall. McCall is just way more versatile and useful for the same cost. So that's probably going to be their problem there. Next profile, marksmanship level 1. So you get shock, and then it's a K1 marksman rifle for 20 points. Tohaa already has a lot of access to K1 through both the Kosul and the Sukiel. We also have some AP running around and stuff like that. So again, I don't really see this guy doing much. And then shock on top of K1 is not a combination that will reward you all that often. So that's a little bit of an odd inclusion there. Don't really rate that profile well at all, and don't think you'll see much of it. Last one is going to be just a Spitfire with a Swick, or for a Swick and 17 points. Pretty cheap Spitfire, but again, he's not very good with it. Wouldn't work very well in just a normal triad. This guy's meant for more of a tri-core, which is a spiral core thing. So the fact that we can't really buff him at all, that ballistic skill 11 makes it not worth taking the Spitfire for the cost, you know. So overall, the story of these guys is they're okay. I do like the boarding shotgun profile quite a bit, but in Tohaa, we just have so much competition for ways to fill triads that these guys aren't really ever going to break in there. And then, like I said, if they get rid of the fire team triad ability on him, completely worthless for Tohaa. Might as well take him off of Army, because you're never going to see him. What else we got here? All right, so Tagma Schemers. This is also a model that has a ton of profiles, but we only get one. So we have average movement, average CC, average ballistic skill for a Tohaa gunner, poor physique, average whip, bad defensive stats, only 1 wound. So this guy's definitely not in charge of a triad or anything like that. Do have Hollow Projector 1. Kind of cute. There's some fun things you can do with that in Tohaa. It's a lot better than the Hollow Projector 2 for the coattail, which is very hard to actually deceive people with that. But Hollow Projector 1, you can pretend to be a bunch of things in triads that, you know, won't look weird if it's hiding or something like that, and then you can reveal that he's just a little guy and throw them for a loop. So Hollow Projector 1, pretty good in Tohaa. He can go in a fire team, of course, which is very good. Counterintelligence is okay. I would never take a model just for counterintelligence, but if you're taking him for other reasons, it's worth having. Shock immunity, don't really rate that at all on this guy. Very seldom would you waste time trying to pick him up with a medic or a doctor or something, so I could care less if he dies to shock or not. So I really wish they'd just taken that off and made him a little cheaper or something. Same with stealth. Could have gotten rid of both of those abilities and made him 15 points. I think it'd be a much better and much more useful model overall. So only actual profile we get is 16.0 Swick, pistol knife, breaker combi, nanopulsar. This makes him a decent backup gunner. A breaker combi is a pretty fair gun, and then a nanopulsar is good, so you're mostly going to use him for the nanopulsar, I think. But the breaker combi, if your primary gunner dies and you backfill the triad, you can certainly get some use out of that. He has ballistic skill 12, so while not anything special, he's at least decent, and then 4 shots with a triad is pretty good. So all that stuff is fine. Really would have been nice if Holo Projector gave like Surprise Shot or something like that, but unfortunately that's only Holo Projector level 2 as far as I know. That would have really buffed him up, because then you can use him for some surprise maneuvers a little bit better, but that's just kind of what he is. I don't think you'll really see this guy much in Tohaa at all. Maybe in some missions where going first is really the only way to go, so like decap, firefight, supplies, that kind of thing, just to if you're worried about, you know, stripping 2 orders instead of 1, he's good for that. But otherwise I don't really see him getting that much play. The 16-point cost is interesting, just because that's pretty cheap for a reasonable Tohaa backup gunner. You can get a Sakiel for about that, which is a little more durable, but this guy's gun is a little bit better. So I think it's just going to depend on what you're looking for. I probably wouldn't use them that much because they're missing like one thing, either a slight cost reduction by getting rid of some of these weird abilities, or like another ability with maybe a slightly additional cost or something like that. That would make him truly useful. So for me, it's just a little bit lacking, but certainly not something where if you use one, you're going to be called out for it or anything like that. And then we have the last new model for Tohaa, which is going to be the Keelson. I talked about this guy in the reveal video for Spiral Core a little bit, but he's definitely a big boy. So we got a heavy infantry, which means he's hackable, which is pretty rare for Tohaa. That's something that if you are a Tohaa player, you have to keep in mind, because we're not really used to having to play around hacking as AROs and things like that. So definitely kind of watch out for that. 6'2 movement, very good for reasons I talked about. CC 21, very good. Ballistic skill 13, very good for Tohaa. Physical 14, very high. So that's very good as well. Whip 12 is low, not usually going to come up, but if he's getting hacked, that is going to hurt him, and for being able to do resets and stuff like that. So that's a little bit bigger of a ding than it actually looks like. 4.6 for ARM and BTS is excellent. Would have obviously preferred those to be swapped, but armor 4 in Tohaa is very high, so you can take some fights pretty safely against like lighter guns, especially if you're in cover. And then he has 2 wounds on the Symbiont active profile, which is always very nice because it keeps him being awesome for a little while longer. And then Silhouette 5, you could take 2 of them. Special skills are going to be dual wield, so you can see that both of the profiles have a DA and a shock CCW, so not the best combination. Would have preferred like DA and AP or something like that, but you get what you get. Still pretty useful. He has Assault, but not Berserk. So Assault is a weird one on him because it doesn't really make use of his 6'2 movement very well. It just has everybody else, but it is a very good ability to have, period. So we'll definitely take that. Being able to rush in 8 inches on something and then smack it is a pretty good surprise move. Natural Born Warrior keeps him pretty good in close combat, so he's either going to be shutting down your opponent's martial arts and all that kind of stuff, or he can just buff himself a little bit, which puts him at a very respectable CC. And then he has Metachemistry 1, which has some very good rolls for him, and then some not so useful rolls. The things we're looking for would be like some kind of immunity, or plus arm, or better movement. Any of those would be really fantastic. When he goes Symbiont and active, we lose a point of ballistic skill, which is very sad. Lose 2 points of physique. Movement speed normalizes, and then he loses all of his defensive stats as well. Go down to size 2. So that's going to be slightly annoying. I don't actually know if the model comes with a Silhouette 2 model for you to use, a la the Gorgos, when it goes down or not. I do have somebody bringing me a Spiral Core box from Adepticon, so I will know soon. I'm sure some people already know, but that's just slight inconvenience there. And then the profiles are either Red Fury, Panzerfaust, Heavy Pistol, and then the CCWs we talked about for 53 points and 1 Swick, or Mark 12 Panzerfaust, Heavy Pistol, CCWs for 53 points and 0 Swick. So if this guy could go into triads, he would be a complete monster, because he's a very good primary gunner. Ballistic skill 13 is excellent for Tohaa. He has good arms, so we'd be comfortable using him in some firefights where they're maybe a little dicier. He also has 3 wounds going, which is very strong. And then he is a pretty good kind of counter push unit, since he's good in close combat. and has the pistols if things get close, that kind of thing. So that's very useful. And then having a Panzerfaust is actually fantastic in Tohaa, because we have so much baggage and things like that. So everything works. It's just that he can't go into a triad, and that's really where I don't rate him very well. Tohaa doesn't really have much need of standalone like Rambo style models. We already have a bunch of good ones. We have the Clipsos, we have Rasail, we have the Coattail, who's okay. We have the Nikul, who's pretty good, things like that. So it's not really filling any kind of role that we really need. He's just a big dumb guy who can shoot pretty well and then can fight pretty well. But like I said, we don't really have any need of that in one package. It's very easy to put together a try where you have a McCall in it, who is better in close combat than this guy and can deliver himself. Although having the assault would be nice. And then you combine that with, one of our many good gunners who does that kind of thing. And when you add those guys together, they're still almost always less than 53 points, and often less than the one SWIT cost if you go that way as well. And you're getting 2 orders to boot instead of 1 order. So I don't really ever see this guy play in any kind of serious Tohaa list. He just doesn't work without being in some kind of fire team or something like that, which he can't be with us. So just having a big dumb guy run around is a waste of points, a waste of orders, all that kind of stuff. Other than that, I rate him very well. Red Fury or Mark 12 are excellent guns. I would rather have the Red Fury personally, but they're both fine. Like I said, Panzerfausts are really good, especially in a triad because you can fire both, and then we have baggage, so that makes it decently easy to kill some big stuff, because if you're trying to shoot them with 1 shot, it doesn't work quite as well. But if you have 2 shots, it works much better. He's good in close combat and has reasonable close combat weapons, and then he has the heavy pistol as well, so if you get close to him, he can fight at that range band. So this guy really does fight at every range band. He fights at medium, far, close, and CC. So he does do it all, and if he could just be in a triad, he'd be an excellent addition to Tohaa. But unfortunately, he cannot be, so that kind of just bubbles him out with the other stuff that we have available to us. So those are all the new things for Tohaa. As you can see, we really didn't pick up very much, which is very disappointing because this year was supposed to be the year of the Tohaa. I would trade all of these models back just to keep the Symbiomates as they were. I don't rate any of them as being more important than how Symbiomates used to be. They're really the only ones that I have much use for, as I talked about, were the Grief Operator, who is pretty good. I can see him making a lot of lists. The Kriegel will make some lists because he's still a little bit expensive, especially as like a backup guy who's not a specialist. And then, of course, we have the Drawl, who is probably the best model that we got. The only one I would say would make a lot of lists, just because you can do a lot of really fun things with the Stratus Cloud. He is a specialist, which helps out a lot. And then, while his guns aren't super great, he does pair well with a more long-range shooting model so that he can kind of run interference for them. And then you can do a lot of awesome things with the Dazer as well. So that's where I kind of get a lot of his value from, is the Dazer and the Stratus Cloud. And exploiting those, I think, is going to be a big part of making this guy's kit one worth paying for within Tohaa. The SMG and the Pulsar are fine. You'll get some use out of them, but primarily I think of this guy as like an expensive toolbox piece who can fight if pressed to, but that's not going to be the primary thing that I'm pushing for him on the tabletop. So overall, speaking about Tohaa exclusively, I think we came out worse than we started the update on. That's just my opinion. I would have really liked to see some of the other profiles from Spiral Core added to Tohaa, or just some other changes or something like that to kind of make up for the Symbiomate change. Like I said, Kael'tars could have been made cheaper or something like that. And I'm really on the fence with how good Symbiont armor is now compared to other ways of getting multiple wounds. I rated a lot lower than I did before, and then that rating extends to, other models as well, not just the Symbiomate itself. So if I'm looking at Tohaa, I'm probably putting my Rasail to the side for a moment. The Coattail was kind of already barely hanging on to relevancy, so he's probably full gone now, because he loses everything that makes him worth taking if he takes even 1 wound. So we're probably going to be sticking a lot with Gao rails, which are rock solid. Sacules are going to kind of, I think, make a tick back up just because they don't really lose anything when they go symbiote and active, and they're very toolboxy. You can give all kinds of cool equipment to them and stuff like that, and they're very reasonably priced. So for me, Tohaa is probably going to go towards being a little bit more of a like a horde style army, where you're going to have one triad that's very serious, one that's a little less serious, maybe one more that's kind of just like an excuse to have a McCall to break out other guys and stuff like that. And then you're going to be loading up on as many cheap orders as you can take. So looking at things like baggage chaxas, looking at things like the 12-point Quarry Sentinel, looking at things like Kamel Forward Observers, that kind of stuff is really going to be able to fill up your list very nicely with orders. And then you can really treat the symbiont armor as kind of a do-over wound. So, the days of being able to place Tohaa models in an ARO position and just let your opponent break themselves against that, those are over. I never really played like that anyways, so style-wise, this isn't as big of a change for me. I was very much all about, let's go out on the active turn, do whatever we're going to do, pull back and hide. And I think that's how Tohaa are going to play very well right now, because that's going to play to their mobility with triads, which of course they still have, as well as having that extra wound more of as bad luck protection for if you get a crit against you or something like that. And then you can either take another chance, or you can run away, or do whatever you're going to do. So it's much more of a defensive wound than any kind of offensive wound, if that makes sense. So that's really all I have to say about the Symbiomate change and the Spiral Core additions for right now. These are first impressions. I probably will play around with this stuff a little bit, just to kind of show off a list I've been working on, if ITS fucking feels like loading. Yeah, let's look at that one really quick. So this one was made after the update, so you can see that I have a pretty serious triad here. We have the Gauro with the Spitfire, the Drow is his backup, and his specialist. The McCall is delivery and fighty stuff. Then we have the Viral Saciel with the Nimbus Plus grenades. He's in another triad, also a fairly serious gunner. We've got a Kumatail Doctor Engineer, another McCall, and then 4 baggage checks, is like I was talking about, to load up on orders. And then Liberto, which is pretty much in 100% of Tohaa list because he fills up so many holes for us. And then you can see here that I've kind of gone away from the Rasail. So we have a Kameo Lieutenant who just hides in the back and provides an order like most other people's lieutenant. We got a Quarry Sentinel because he's pretty cheap. Keep the Corral in there because he's really good. Play with the Grief Operator, pretty cheap, and you can do a lot of fun stuff with him. And then I have a less serious triad here, led by a Kriegel. Also packs a Kamel Forward Observer as a decent ARO piece, and a specialist, and then a third McCall for delivery and stuff like that. So very much so, no symbiomates in this list. I don't think they're worth taking anymore. Again, that's my opinion. I don't think they have any place in a competitive Tohaa list for the cost that you pay for them versus what they do. So I've kind of turned that into like more orders. You can see I have 10 in the first group, and then 7 in a regular, as well as the lieutenant order if I ever use that in the secondary. So a whole bunch of orders, probably more than most Tohaa lists. A lot of Tohaa lists I see have about 15 orders. This one has 17 to 18. So that's the way I see them going, is you really only want a couple really strong active symbiont profile gunners, and then the rest you just want to be enabling those guys, and then you want to take very smart fights and things like that. So while Tohaa are still a pretty durable army, they did lose a lot of that durability, and I think you have to approach that durability in a different way. Happy to talk about that some more if anybody has any questions in the comment section below. But other than that, that's about it for this video. And like I said, I will have a Spiral Core one out at some point. Also thinking about doing one for Deshat Mercenary Company, as I'm strongly considering picking them up. Tohaa doesn't really fit my playstyle as much as they did before, whereas Deshat is kind of broken, which I might get into if we go into the video there. So, you know, look for that if that's something I decide that I want to do. Generally, I try to stick to talking about factions that I know pretty well, though, and I don't know NA2 stuff particularly well. But that's all I have this time. Thank you guys very much for watching.